All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and our continuation of our fifth BCBA practice exam, where we are going through the next 10 questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including exams, study guides, and combo packs. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. 141. A behavior analyst writes a high probability request sequence into a client's treatment plan. Target behavior is answering a basic addition question. During supervision, the analyst observes that the technician will ask the client to say their name and their address prior to asking the math question, but the client does not always answer during the sequence. What would you tell the technician? All right, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of this analyst, and you're going to train the technician on something. Well, we know we're using a high probability request sequence, meaning we're evoking some high probability responses followed by a low probability response. We're building up behavior momentum. Target behavior, the low probability request, is the basic addition question. So during supervision, it's observed that the technician will ask the client to say their name and their address prior to asking the math question, which is fine, but the client does not always answer during the sequence. So what's the issue here? And notice how we're attacking the question first. We're not jumping to the answer choices. We're fully understanding the question, and then we'll go to the answer choices. Once you start getting good at this, you should try and predict answers before you even see the answer choices. What is the issue here? Well, we're trying to use this high probability request sequence, which involves a lot of high probability requests followed by a low probability request for behavior momentum and to evoke that low P response. But if the client is not responding to the high probability request, that's an issue. So what would you tell the technician? A, the technician should deliver one more high probability request prior to the math question. Maybe, but that's not necessarily the issue here because the client isn't even responding to the current high probability request. B, the technician should make sure that the high P requests are in the client's repertoire. Yes, before they do anything, before the high probability request even begins, all the high P requests need to be reliably evoked. Meaning, if I ask them to do it, they should almost do it 100% of the time, right? We want things that are reliably evoked because the whole idea is to build behavior momentum. If you're asking high P requests that they can't do, that's going to just kill momentum. C, the technician should never use personal information questions in a high P sequence to avoid aversive conditions. No, name is a good one. Name should be easy. We don't know anything about this client, but for a lot of clients, that's going to be a very high probability request and would be a great one to use, except it has to be in the repertoire. And then D, to continue implementing the sequence the same way. No, they need to alter it. They either need to better teach these requests or they need to identify different high probability requests that are more reliably evoked and in the client's repertoire. So the issue here is technicians should make sure that the high P requests are in the client's repertoire. 142. A team of 3 behavior technicians are trained on using inter-response time to measure behavior. They are now to use IRT to measure a client's counting behavior. The onset is when the client begins to count starting from any number, and the offset is when the client stops counting for 10 seconds or more. When should IRT data collection begin for the first data point? All right, measurement question, inter-response time question. What is inter-response time? Time between 2 behaviors, more specific, or 2 responses, more specifically, time from the end of one response to the beginning of the another. So we are looking for when to begin data collection for the first data point. So our very first data point in IRT starts when? Well, it's going to start at the end of that first response. Because remember, we're taking IRT from the end of one response to the start of another. So if we need the time in between response 1 and response 2, we need to start when response 1 is done. So what do we know about the responses? Well, we know the onset, the beginning, is when the client begins to count starting from any number. The offset, the end, is when the client stops counting for 10 seconds or more. So if we're going to take IRT data, we need to start when the client stops counting for 10 seconds or more, or at the offset. So A, as soon as the client starts counting from any number, well, you're not going to start data collection there because that would be more along the lines of a duration measurement. That doesn't tell us time in between responses because remember, for IRT, we're going from the end of one response to the beginning of another, not the beginning of the first response. B, as soon as the client stops counting the first time. Well, by our definition, we've got a more specific offset, which is 10 seconds or more. That's why it's so important to understand everything about the question and what information the question is presenting to you and what information you should use. So C, as soon as the client stops counting for 10 seconds, 10 or more seconds the first time. Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. That's the end of the first response. We start our timer. On the next onset, we stop our timer. That's going to be enter response time. And then D, enter response time data. Cannot be taken for this question. Well, sure it can. We just have to start at the right point, which is as soon as the client stops counting for 10 or more seconds the first time. 143. Sally has been studying in the library all day and her brain is exhausted. She walks into the coffee bean in the library and orders a grande hot coffee. The cashier tells Sally that grande is only at Starbucks and she can order a regular instead. Sally's initial order is an example of what? Now, there's a couple different ways you could go with this answer, but it's a relatively simple question. Some of the questions aren't going to be that hard. What do? We don't overthink, trust our prep, answer, move on. We know Sally has been studying and she wants coffee. She goes to the coffee bean, orders a grande hot coffee. Cashier says, well, grande is only at Starbucks, so you can get a regular instead. So we're looking at this order, Sally's response. What happened with Sally's response? A, overgeneralization. Yeah, Sally's overgeneralized ordering a grande hot coffee from Starbucks to other coffee places that don't have grande. This is textbook overgeneralization, a response occurring too often or at inappropriate or improper times. What about discrimination? Well, Sally was unable to discriminate between the coffee shops. I'm sure Sally can, but in this case, she did not. What about differentiation? Well, there's no response differentiation. It's the same responses. Response differentiation is choosing between responses. So if she orders grande at Starbucks and then orders a regular at Coffee Bean, now she's engaging in response differentiation. And then D, an interverbal. Well, we're looking at Sally's order. And what is Sally's order? Well, Sally walks up and says, grande hot coffee. It's a command, right? It's evoked by a motivating operation. When the cashier tells Sally her response, the cashier's behavior is an interverbal. Sally's is a command. So Sally's initial order is an example of overgeneralization. 144. Grandma brings ice cream to her grandkids on Sunday. She always brings a variety of flavors so the kids can pick their favorite. She will usually put out 3 flavors at a time and let the youngest kid pick their flavor. What would the grandma do next if this were to resemble a multiple stimulus preference assessment with replacement? So we're looking at a multiple stimulus preference assessment, and we need to apply it to this scenario. More specifically, more importantly, with replacement. So when we're thinking preference assessments, and this one tells us what you're using, but you should always ask yourself first, how many stimuli are we assessing? If it's 1, it's usually going to be a single choice. If it's 2 at a time, it's usually a forced choice or paired choice. If it's 3 or more, it's either going to be a multiple stimulus or maybe even a free operand. We already know that. So we know it's also with replacement. So grandma has ice cream, brings it to her kids. She brings a variety. She then puts out 3 flavors at a time. So there's our number of stimuli in our assessments. She lets the youngest kid pick their flavor. So now we're going to treat this like a multiple stimulus assessment with replacement. So with replacement is obviously a hint because something's going to be replaced. So if they put out 3 flavors and pick 1 flavor, what's next? A, once a flavor is picked, put 3 new flavors on the table. Is that how the with replacement procedure goes? It is not, okay? With replacement, we don't replace every stimulus. B, once a flavor is picked, remove the flavor and replace it with another one. Now, careful. That's also not how it goes. We're not removing the flavor that was picked. What's going to happen is C, once a flavor is picked, remove the other 2 flavors and replace with new ones. So you take the flavor that was picked or the item that was picked, put it back, and replace all the other items with new items. And then once a flavor is picked, remove that flavor. Well, that would be more without replacement. We're focused on with replacement. In this case, once an ice cream flavor is picked, remove the other 2 flavors and replace with new ones. The question wants us to apply it in the context of a multiple stimulus preference assessment. That's what we've done. All right. Don't get bogged down in the details. 145, you attend a conference as part of your professional development for the year. One of the professional presentations you attend features the names, ages, and other characteristics of several clients that you know personally, but no consent disclaimer is given. What should you do? As we know, if we're going to share personal information, we have to have full consent. We only share information with people who have consent. So if there's a presentation at a public conference and there are names, ages, and other characteristics being shown, there needs to be some indication that consent was given, especially that you know these clients personally. So if you're in this situation ethically, what are you going to do? A, report the presenter immediately for a confidentiality violation. Remember, with ethical scenarios, we always try to resolve them first, unless some immediate harm has been done. If harm has been done, it's a different story. There's no immediate harm here, right? We're revealing personal information. It's not good, right? Unless there is consent, but there's no immediate harm. You always try to resolve the ethical issue first before moving further. B, inquire whether or not the presenter received consent from the clients. That is your duty. And people say, well, why does it matter? It's not my business. That's what makes ethics difficult. You have to abide by the code as a behavior analyst. You're required to. And sometimes it involves difficult situations and difficult decisions. In this case, especially, you need to figure out, did this presenter receive consent from the clients? Yes or no? C, do nothing since it is not your business. Again, it's an potential ethical violation. It is your business. You're protecting the clients. And then D, do nothing since the presentation is featured at a conference. It is more likely ethical. You can't assume that. Our first rule is do no harm. If this could potentially reveal clients or harm clients, you've got to do something about it. So the first step, you need to figure out, did that presenter receive consent from the clients? Yes or no? 146, you hold a team meeting for a client who's been engaging in maladaptive behavior at a more frequent rate compared to last month. You ask each technician to describe the function of the behavior to you. Which of the following responses would be most acceptable? So which response is going to be most acceptable? Well, what kind of response are we looking for? We're looking for the technicians to describe the functions of the behavior. So meaning we need something that involves one of our functions. Tangible, escape, automatic sensory, or attention, right? We need something along those lines because you can describe behavior in a lot of different ways. We need function. So A, the client repeatedly grabs Play-Doh or putty and opens and closes their fist when they are bored. Well, first, what are we describing? Topography, what the behavior looks like, which is fine, but it's not the function. Second, bored is not a function. So A is not giving us what we need. B, the client will grab Play-Doh or putty and squeeze very hard throughout the day for sensory reasons. Okay, where we've given a little topography. More importantly, we've given a function. Remember, automatic is a technical term, but a lot of people these days say sensory, and so automatic and sensory are more or less interchangeable at this point. So sensory reasons is a function. C, the client will grab Play-Doh or something similar throughout the day for control. Control is not a function. Some people might consider it accurately or not, depending on who you ask. That control would be the unofficial fifth function. Officially, it is not. So officially, you need to worry about the four functions, which control is not. And then D, the client will grab putty or Play-Doh and engage with it for hours at a time. That's more the measurement, right? The duration. We're looking for the function, the Y. And the Y is in B. Client will grab Play-Doh or putty, squeeze very hard throughout the day for sensory reasons. 147, a technician calls you and tells you that they woke up late and forgot to eat breakfast before they arrived at their client's house. They tell you they are hungry and that the client offered to cook them breakfast as the rest of the family were about to sit down and eat. They ask you if they can accept. What should you say as a behavior analyst? This is going to be a big part of your job. Taking calls like this, you've got to resolve ethical scenarios and issues like these where technicians are doing the right thing and reaching out to you. So you're put in these situations and it's your duty to make the right call. Context, technician woke up late, didn't eat breakfast, they were hungry. Client offered to cook them breakfast as the family was about to sit down and eat. Well, there's a few different things here that's wrong. One, the technician's there to work. They're there to provide services. Unless there's a specific program in place, they really shouldn't be sitting down and eating with the family, right? Offering support, offering through a behavior plan or treatment plan is one thing. but just sitting down and eating is, one, inappropriate, two, opens the door for potential multiple relationships, conflicts of interest. There's so many things wrong with it, right? So it shouldn't be done. Okay. There's no information regarding cultural reasons. It's simply the technician woke up late. And that's not an excuse to sit down and eat a meal on the clock with the family. Okay. So what do you say as the behavior analyst? A, allow them to eat with the family just this one time due to special circumstances. The problem with that is one time is rarely ever one time, right? This starts a pattern, and the next time they refuse, it becomes worse than refusing the first time. So the one time only thing is never a good idea. B, tell them to decline politely and offer to speak with the family if necessary. Perfect. Let them explain the situation. If the family doesn't understand or presses further, offer to speak with the family if necessary. That's your role. C, asks them to leave the client's house and then write them up for unethical behavior. They haven't done anything unethical yet. They're actually doing the right thing and calling and reaching out to you. So they're doing everything okay so far. D, speak with the family immediately and explain that they should never offer the technician foods due to the BACB ethical code. Well, if the technician is able to decline politely and nothing else comes of it, leave it there, right? No sense in trying to fix something that isn't broken, right? You just might do more harm than good. So everything is fine here. All you want them to do, decline politely, and then you offer to speak with the family if necessary. 148, a reading teacher wants to increase the number of pages her students read each week. The teacher is considering using a changing criterion design for each of the students. What could be a potential issue for the teacher? Potential issue with a changing criterion design. Let's start thinking of what could go wrong with the changing criterion design. Specifically, if she wants to increase number of pages the students read each week. So with the changing criterion design, let's say she starts at 15 pages. Well, she's going to stepwise and systematically increase to 18, then 21 and 23. And she wants to see the behavior follow those increases more or less accurately. So what could be the issue? A, there's no way to demonstrate an experimental control in the scenario. Sure there is, right? We can demonstrate experimental control with a changing criterion design. One, we need to check, is the behavior in line with the criterion changes? And two, you can reverse the criterion and see if the behavior follows. B, the design may impede progress. That's one of the issues with criterion designs, is that learning might be interrupted because you're setting a specific goal each criterion. And if one kid reads 15 pages and then wants to jump to 30, that kind of breaks the whole criterion design. So the design may impede progress here. C, there is a greater risk of multiple treatment interference. That would be more for a multi-element design, right? An alternating treatment design. And then D, the teacher will be unable to take baseline data. No, she can still take baseline. There's nothing wrong with baseline and changing criterion. The main issue might be that the design may impede progress. If you set the number of pages too low and the kid is trying to advance quicker, then that kind of breaks the whole system. 149, a behavior analyst you work with has been complaining to you for a couple of months now that one of her families refuses to collect data or implement interventions outside of services. The client's progress is now affected. What would be the best recommendation to make to the analyst? Luckily, in the new ethical code, the board has given analysts a lot more freedom and kind of control over situations like this, because there's nothing more frustrating than a set of stakeholders who may not be involved and you feel like you're wasting your time. So this behavior analyst says that for a couple months now, they're not collecting data, not implementing interventions, and now the progress is affected. Well, that's an issue. What recommendation would you make to the analyst in the situation? A, use the time allocated to that family for other families instead. Well, the problem here is you still have that client under your responsibility, right? There's still your responsibility. You can't just ignore them, okay? B, start the process of transitioning the client. Yes, in this case, a transition might be necessary. It might be best. And that's going to involve a transition plan, reaching out to other potential analysts, a time frame. All these things should begin because clearly progress is not being made It's affecting the analysts. It's probably affecting the families. You can't just ignore them, but you've got to do something. So we don't abandon clients, but we try and transition them best as possible. C, terminate services with the client over the next week or two. Way too short of notice, right? 30 days, okay? Minimum, really. And then D, report the family to the BACB for ethical violations. Once again, I'll say it over and over. The only people who need to adhere to BACB codes are analysts and technicians and people certified by the board. Okay, that's an important thing to remember. Notice how we always read every answer choice, and we not only identify why the right answer is right, but why the wrong answers are wrong. These are learning questions. The goal isn't to do as many questions as possible as quickly as possible. Do a question, review thoroughly. So what should be done here, the recommendation that should be made here, is to start the process of transitioning the client. And then finally, 150, a clinical director is concerned that one of her behavior analysts aren't conducting full assessments with their clients. They seem to struggle to explain the variables associated with certain behaviors, but they have full behavior plans written anyway. The analyst is most likely doing what? Now, there's a very specific answer here. What is occurring with this analyst? Well, the clinical director suspects they aren't conducting full assessments because they can't really explain variables associated with certain behaviors. So variables that evoke and maintain behaviors, but they have plans written anyway. Analyst is doing what most likely? Probably A, using default interventions. Default interventions, also known as default technologies or default antecedent interventions, occur when the variables that are maintaining and evoking behavior aren't necessarily identified, but we're intervening anyway. Improperly conducting the assessments. We don't know that for sure. We don't even know if they are conducting the assessments. C, experiencing personal issues outside of work. Nothing indicates there could be personal issues going on. We don't assume. And then D, intentionally misleading the clients. Again, we're not sure, right? All we know is they're writing behavior plans, not understanding all the variables associated with certain behaviors, so they're most likely using default interventions. Check out behavioranalyst.study.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you subscribe. As always, let us know when you pass so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.